March is Women's History Month, and this is day 28 of talking about strong women, women you need to know. Today, let's talk about Maria Tecla Artemisia Montessori, born in Italy, August 31st, 1870. She was born to a fairly well-to-do family in Italy. Her father was a financial manager, and her mother prized education, came from a family that prized education, and Maria followed in her steps. Her mother was an avid reader, and not a whole lot of women at that time did so. As I said, Maria followed suit, and of course, living in Italy, she had access to libraries and museums and all kinds of things to help her with her education. She was a great student, in fact, and she was very confident and very ambitious, but she had no desire to just follow along in the very traditional things that were set out for young ladies. So at the age of 13, she decided she was going to do what she wanted and enrolled at an all-boys school for it was a technical school, in hopes of becoming an engineer as a career. In time, she changed her mind and decided she wanted to become a doctor. So obviously that was not done. She applied to the University of Rome and was not accepted, so she doubled down and got more classes and the education she needed, all of the pre-med things that she needed, and was finally accepted to the university to get her Doctor of Medicine. And of course, being female, she faced sexism there. In fact, when they had to do the dissections on cadavers, she was told she had to do that alone because it was inappropriate for a female to do so. So she had to do that part of her work alone. Her very first year in medical school, she received accolades and an academic prize, in fact. And when she finally graduated in 1896 and received her doctorate of medicine, she was employed then by the university hospital and also went into private practice. Her early work in her private practice focused mainly on psychology or psychiatry. She later developed an interest in education and tying these two together because she liked to figure out how we tick. She took more classes on education theory, and she began to question basically everything that was happening in education at that time. She did not believe that everybody was getting a fair share, especially those that had intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it was said of her that she was so voracious to learn about why we taught like we did and where does that come from, where does that way of thinking come from, that she pretty much read everything that had been written about education over the last 200 years. She was determined to figure out why we did what we did and how we learn and why we teach like we do. Well, she continued to learn. She continued to speak to anyone that she could in any field, whether it be at universities, at schools, people in the government, people on school boards. She did whatever she could because she was determined that we change our way of educating so everybody has a chance. Well, it paid off. In 1900, she was appointed a co-director at a training institute where basically they were training special education teachers to teach better. So at this institute, they learned how to teach better, and also she was obviously big in developing materials that they used. And the very short version of what happened at this institute, they took these children that were told that they couldn't learn or would never be able to learn or would never be able to function and do as other students. They took these children, and with better ways of teaching, better materials, these kids, when given tests that would be given to normal children, normal students, they passed these. It took off. All of the work that they had done, the materials they developed, and the better ways of teaching caught the eye not only of the government, but civic leaders, the departments of education and health, and a lot more people. So she wanted to learn even more about this and went back. She left that institute and went back for more education and started more studies in psychiatry, physiology, psychology, and anthropology. By 1907, she was given a task. She was basically challenged. She opened a daycare, and the students there were children who were 3 to 7 years old who had been left alone by their parents when they went to work. Left alone. They were unruly, and many thought they just weren't going to have a chance at learning anything because at that age they'd been left alone and they were past any point of being able to learn. Well, she observed them and said, I don't think so. So, with the materials that she had developed, she soon found out that the kids were interested in and completing the puzzles that she had created. They were interested in preparing their own meals, using the learning materials that she had created. She said they absorbed knowledge like crazy, and they absorbed it from the materials and from their surroundings, and essentially began teaching themselves with her way of teaching. She also continued to work with kids and created new learning materials. In watching them, it helped her develop more materials that would help them. So this big, beautiful circle was there. And she also created environments that she said let their natural desire to learn flourish, while giving them the freedom to choose how they would learn particular tasks and functions and things like that. Well, it thrived even more so, and those that people had thought were unable to learn were learning and thriving in it, and they showed great concentration, attention, and even began self-disciplining themselves. All of these children that everyone had thought were unruly and unable to be educated. Well, to say the least, her methods caught on, and to say that her impact with this went worldwide would be an understatement. By 1910, her method, what we know as the Montessori method, had gone worldwide. It was in the UK, in Paris, Spain, Argentina, Australia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Switzerland, Syria, New Zealand, and of course her native Italy. And also by 1911, it was in Tarrytown, New York. The very first one opened in 1911 here in the U.S. Miss Maria spent her life teaching and writing and educating to anyone that she could, whether that be at conventions, universities, hospitals, to governments, whoever it was. She continued teaching her method. She also was a campaigner for women's rights, having faced sexism herself, and was known as a leading voice of feminism in her native Italy and other places. She was also a very big believer in peace, and in fact, she spoke to many governments from 1932 to 51, governments and organizations, about peace and the importance of peace, and believed so much in teaching peace at a very young age that she added peace education to the Montessori curriculum. And because of her teaching worldwide on peace as well, she also received nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1949, 50, and 51, a total of 6 nominations for the Nobel Prize in all. She even lived through war during her time of global travel, teaching people about education and peace. And even when she was exiled in one country and could not get out and go home, she continued to teach the Montessori method, even in exile. Miss Maria spent her final days in the Netherlands, or in Amsterdam, and passed away peacefully finally at the age of 81 on May 6, 1952, in her friend's garden. My goodness. So today, on day 28 of Women's History Month, we celebrate this pioneer, this advocate for children of all nations and abilities, and this creator of the Montessori method, and this advocate for peace worldwide, Miss Maria Montessori. Ti salutiamo.